Hey guys, tonight we're venturing into a place where the cold is so bone deep, your nose might consider resigning from your face. You're standing on a wind-whipped stretch of Arctic tundra, somewhere near the top of the world. The snow is blinding, almost glowing under a merciless sun that's been hovering above the horizon for what feels like weeks. There's no shade, no shelter, just light bouncing off every icy surface like nature's own interrogation lamp. You pull the hood of your parka tighter, but your eyes are still watering, stinging, as if they're under attack. It's here, in this place where the sunlight doesn't warm but wounds, that humanity quietly invented something brilliant. Something that could spare your vision, your sanity, and maybe even your life. Not a fancy pair of Ray-Bans. Not aviators. Just a slim piece of carved antler with two precise little slits. The world's first sunglasses. And you probably won't survive this frozen landscape without them. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments below. I love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the ice, feet crunching against layers of snowpack that have outlived empires. There's no color out here, just white, blue, and the kind of blinding brightness that makes you feel like you've walked into a dentist's light fixture. The cold stings at your cheeks, but it's your eyes that really suffer. Each blink feels raw. There's a term for it, snow blindness, a kind of ultraviolet sunburn on your corneas. Cute, right? This isn't just an Arctic inconvenience, it's a full-on disability in regions where visibility could mean the difference between catching dinner and becoming it. And before modern medicine had names for it, indigenous Arctic peoples had already built a defense. Historians still argue whether the snow goggles were invented out of pure trial and error or whether they were inspired by the squint of a seasoned hunter, but either way, they worked. Better than you'd expect, honestly. Your hands fumble inside your fur-lined satchel and pull out a curved strip of antler, just wide enough to cover your eyes. Two narrow slits run across the front. You tie it around your head and instantly, miraculously, the glare vanishes. You can see again, not perfectly, but enough. It's like adjusting your screen brightness after sitting in the sun. Your head stops pounding. Your stomach unkinks. You don't feel quite so feral anymore. These snow goggles, called ilgok or igok in some dialects, were no fashion statement. They were survival tools honed by necessity. Some were carved from driftwood, others from ivory. The slits weren't just for show. They reduced the amount of light entering the eye and even sharpened visual acuity in bright conditions. Not unlike the pinhole effect of modern photography. They didn't block UV rays in the way polycarbonate lenses do today, but they limited exposure dramatically. The narrow horizontal slits forced you to focus and made it easier to spot contrast in the snow. That could mean identifying a crack in sea ice, or seeing a polar bear a few seconds earlier than it sees you. Of course, wearing them meant you had to move a bit differently. Less peripheral vision, more deliberate steps. Kind of like putting blinders on a horse, but the alternative was walking blind into a glacier. And no one wants that obituary. One popular misconception is that the Inuit lived in perpetual darkness. Not true. In spring and summer, daylight lasts for weeks at a time. During those endless sunny stretches, the UV rays bouncing off the ice are merciless. You can't close your eyes forever. Not if you're out hunting seals or navigating across miles of tundra. The snow goggles weren't a convenience. They were a revolution. There's a quiet elegance to the design. No moving parts, no screws, just a single piece of natural material, shaped by hand and intuition. The best ones were polished smooth on the inside to sit gently against the face, and sometimes soot was added around the slits to cut glare even further, like a proto-eyeliner for the survivalist. And here's a delightful little oddity. Some ancient goggles were decorated. Carvings along the edges, tiny patterns etched with bone tools. Historians still argue whether these designs were functional, grip texture, perhaps, or purely aesthetic. But let's face it, even when fighting for survival, humans can't resist a little flair. The earliest surviving examples have been dated back over 2,000 years. Imagine that, before the Roman Empire rose and fell, before paper was a thing in Europe. While people in the Mediterranean were still debating which god to sacrifice a goat to, Inuit engineers were already solving one of the most aggressive optical hazards on Earth with bone and patience. You duck your head as a gust of icy wind slices across the plain. Your breath fogs in front of you, and for a moment, all you hear is the faint hiss of snow shifting in drifts. But your eyes, your blessed, shaded eyes, can still see. The horizon is clear. You can make out the jagged line of ice blocks marking your route back to shelter. And here's the wildest part. This brilliant, protective tool existed for centuries before modern cultures thought to replicate it. While Europeans were still squinting into the sun or smearing their eyes with various herbs, the Inuit had already cracked the code on vision protection. And they did it with 0 degrees Celsius and 0 degrees of ego. You step inside the igloo, ducking low to keep from smacking your forehead on the arched entrance. The temperature difference is immediate. Outside, your breath practically froze midair. In here, it's surprisingly warm, well, relatively speaking. The air smells faintly of seal oil and packed snow, and there's a soft orange glow from a burning kullik, a shallow stone lamp fed with blubber. In the cozy hush, you sit down beside an elder who's scraping a strip of caribou antler with a flint blade. His hands are calloused and deliberate. You realize, watching him work, that what you hold in your hand, your snow goggles, isn't some primitive object. It's the product of generations of trial, refinement, and intuition. You're looking at ancient design thinking in action. No YouTube tutorials, no patents, just centuries of, what if we try this instead? The elder measures by eye alone, using nothing but his fingers to judge width, depth, curve. He carves 2 slits so narrow they look almost too small to see through. Yet, once the piece is sanded and tied across the face, you understand. The slits are perfectly aligned with your line of sight. It's like someone fine-tuned this tool for your skull. In this moment, you are not a modern bystander. You are part of a lineage of Arctic knowledge. This isn't just eyewear. It's a cultural artifact passed down from a people who outwitted one of Earth's harshest climates. Historians still argue whether the earliest goggles were worn by necessity or whether they carried ceremonial significance too. Some archaeologists think certain designs were worn only by hunters or elders. Others believe they were everyday objects that gained spiritual meaning through use, kind of like how a soldier's boots become sacred not because of what they are, but where they've walked. You run your gloved fingers along the polished surface of your goggles. Some are made from driftwood, yes, but others from baleen, the flexible part of a whale's mouth, sinew, or even walrus ivory. The material often depended on the geography. And geography was everything in the Arctic. If you lived near the sea, you used what washed up. Inland, you carved from bone and antler. And while modern fashion changes faster than you can say runway, these goggles were consistent across thousands of miles. Slight variations, sure, some had straight slits, others curved, but the basic structure remained the same. That's rare. It means the design was efficient enough not to require reinvention. Like the wheel, or the spoon, or peanut butter. As you sit cross-legged in that glowing igloo, listening to the faint crackle of fire on blubber, you notice that the goggles aren't the only brilliant innovation in the room. There's a double-layer fur parka drying near the door, a snow knife shaped like a giant cheese wedge, boots lined with grass for insulation. Everything in here is a masterclass in function-first design. And then there's the snow itself. Out here, snow isn't just frozen water. It's building material, reflector, insulator. The Inuit used it as walls, mirrors, hunting camo, even for soundproofing. The snow goggles, ironically, helped you see better in a world that was nothing but snow. You squint through the slits, testing them again. They don't blur your vision. They narrow it. They make it easier to focus. You begin to notice details, the texture of the ice outside, the curve of a snowdrift, a subtle shift in the sky that might mean a storm's coming. And you realize vision isn't just about seeing more. Sometimes it's about seeing less, but more clearly. There's even evidence that these goggles weren't just used during daylight hours. In twilight or poor visibility, they still helped block wind and reduce distraction. Think of them like an ancient version of noise-canceling headphones, but for your eyes. A fun side note, The inside of some snow goggles were sometimes rubbed with soot or charcoal. Not just for style points, though let's be honest, it looked cool. The black helped cut additional glare and enhanced contrast. Essentially, they created a smoky lens effect long before lenses were even invented. Your $300 Oakleys are quaking, but here's the kicker. This design, this ancient piece of survival tech, remained virtually unknown to the rest of the world for centuries. European explorers who stumbled upon the Arctic in the 16th and 17th centuries marveled at how the Inuit could see in such blinding light. Many failed to even grasp how the goggles worked. Some thought they were ritual masks. Others took them as signs of primitive superstition. Because, of course, it's easier to dismiss brilliance when it doesn't come with brass fittings or Latin labels. And yet, when these same explorers developed snow blindness themselves, they often ended up borrowing or outright stealing the designs. Funny how emergency changes your tune. You stretch your legs and yawn. The elder smiles, pats the goggles you now wear. It's a quiet reminder that these weren't just objects. They were lessons. Lessons in patience, in precision, in humility before nature. You head back outside, blinking through your new lenses. The world hasn't gotten darker, it's just gotten manageable. The light no longer pierces, it simply shimmers. The wind picks up as you step back out of the igloo, tugging at your parka hood with invisible fingers. Snowflakes swirl in little eddies across the open plain, but you barely notice now. Your eyes are shielded, your steps sure. You've crossed a threshold. The Arctic no longer feels like it's trying to erase you. It's still dangerous, yes, but somehow less hostile. As if you've been given an unofficial passport to survive here. You begin trudging toward the next settlement, just visible on the horizon. An irregular cluster of snow domes and driftwood huts, softly glowing in the low polar sun. The crunch beneath your boots is steady, rhythmic. It lulls you. Inside your head, a thought stirs. What kind of people manage to build lives here? Not just survive, but thrive? The answer unfolds with every step you take. These were master improvisers, engineers of ice, survivalists with a sense of humor, and maybe just a tiny bit stubborn, which in these temperatures is a feature, not a flaw. The ingenuity wasn't limited to goggles. Everything about life in the Arctic was a fine-tuned equation. And while your brain might scream impossible, the Inuit turned 40 below into functional. They used dog sleds to move across vast terrain, ice cellars to store food, and layered clothing that wicked moisture away instead of trapping it. Historians still argue whether the layered fur parka was inspired by observations of animals or by sheer, uncomfortable experimentation. Either way, it worked. The outer shell, caribou hide with the fur facing out, blocked wind. The inner shell, fur turned inward, kept warmth in. And yes, it made you look like a walking shag carpet, but would you rather be stylish or frostbitten? Even the igloo you just left behind is misunderstood by outsiders. It's not just a snow pile with a door. It's a physics-defying dome, warm enough to sleep in and strong enough to hold your weight if you climbed on top. Snow is a surprisingly good insulator. When compacted, the air trapped between flakes reduces heat loss. Some inner igloos even had different rooms, separated by low snow walls or fur partitions. Open concept, Arctic edition. Of course, this doesn't mean the Inuit life was easy. Not even close. But it was balanced, in harmony with its environment. And nowhere was that harmony more evident than in the smallest details, like the goggles. You pause at the top of a ridge, scanning the icy horizon. The visibility is astonishing. Every crease in the snow, every shadow, sharper now than it would be with the naked eye. You think about what life must have been like for the first person to slip on a pair of these and feel the pain recede. Did they gasp? Laugh? Immediately try to patent it using bark and a friendly raven witness? It makes you wonder how many inventions in human history were born not in triumph but in desperation. A parent shielding their child from the snow's blinding glare. A hunter losing a week of vision after a sunlit trek. A weary elder, tired of squinting, deciding, there must be a better way. And the goggles weren't just about the individual. They had ripple effects. If the hunters could see, they could hunt. If they could hunt, the community ate. If the community ate, they could make it through the month. One small item with enormous consequences. Now imagine trying to explain this to someone in medieval Europe. You show them a carved strip of bone and tell them it helps you see in the sun. They'd probably either crown you a wizard or ask if it repels demons. Possibly both. But that's the irony, isn't it? In a world where progress is often measured by brass telescopes or marble columns, the most quietly revolutionary things often come from the margins. From places so inhospitable, most people never even visit. And yet, that's where brilliance tends to hide. You walk into the next settlement, greeted by a flurry of snow kicked up by a pack of dogs stretching lazily beside a sled. A child peeks out from under a fur hood and then disappears behind a curtain of sealskin. Somewhere nearby, someone's sharpening a harpoon. Someone else is melting snow for water. And in the background, hung neatly by a doorway, are goggles. Dozens of them, different shapes, different materials, each one carefully crafted. They hang not like ornaments but like tools, essential as a knife, as boots, as fire. No pomp, no pretension, just survival. But also legacy. A quirky tidbit? Some snow goggles had not just one but two sets of slits, stacked vertically. Why? No one's quite sure. Maybe they were multi-purpose. Maybe they were backup slits in case snow covered one. Or maybe someone just wanted to be fancy. Historians still argue whether those double-slit goggles were status symbols or just experimental models. Either way, they look cool. Like ancient bifocals with attitude. You lean against a snow wall and take one more long look through your lenses. It's funny. You're wearing one of the oldest forms of eye protection known to humanity, and somehow it still feels futuristic. Sleek, minimalist, pure function, and in a way, you're not just seeing through slits of antler or wood. You're seeing through the eyes of every person who came before you, who carved, adjusted, squinted, perfected, who stood here, in this same light, and refused to go blind. The wind shifts again as you walk past the cluster of snow homes, and for a moment, the sun reflects sharply off a nearby ice ridge. Even with your goggles on, you instinctively wince. It's that bright, a shimmering wall of light. You stop and stare, wondering how something so beautiful could be so dangerous. And that's the paradox of the Arctic sun. It looks harmless, even welcoming. But give it a few minutes, and it'll scorch your eyes like a beachside tanning bed with a grudge. The ancient Inuit knew this better than anyone. That's why those narrow slits across your eyes feel less like a convenience now, and more like armor. You pull the goggles up just slightly and look at the snow with unfiltered eyes. Almost immediately, you regret it. It's like staring into a mirror made of knives. You blink rapidly, tearing up, and yank the goggles back down. Instant relief. Vision restored. But what exactly is happening? Why does this bright world, made of soft white powder, feel like it's attacking your eyeballs? Turns out snow blindness isn't just metaphorical. It's a medical condition, photokeratitis if you want the technical name. It's basically a sunburn on your cornea. Not visible on the outside, but trust me, your eyeballs feel the heat. And the damage. After just a few hours in extreme sunlight, especially with UV rays bouncing off fresh snow, you might find yourself completely blind for a day or two. And let's be honest, there are better vacation souvenirs than temporary blindness and searing eye pain. The symptoms can hit suddenly. Itching, tearing, sensitivity to light, headaches. In more severe cases, people have reported disorientation or even hallucinations. One 19th century Arctic explorer wrote about seeing dancing white horses in the snow after going without eye protection for too long. Charming imagery. Until you realize he was lying in a sled, semi-conscious, because his retinas were practically toast. And how did the Inuit treat it? That's the remarkable part. Before pharmaceuticals and optometrists, they had their own methods, cool compresses made from snow, yes, the very thing that caused the problem, herbal poultices, and above all, rest and darkness. Sometimes people were wrapped in blankets and kept inside igloos for days, waiting for the pain to pass. There are even whispered accounts of shamans performing healing chants for snow blindness, though historians still argue whether those were actual treatments or more symbolic comfort rituals. A quirky little fact. Some oral traditions say that looking at certain patterns in the snow too long, especially spirals left by wind, could hypnotize the eye, pulling you into a kind of trance that led to temporary blindness. Sounds mythical, right? But when you've got nothing but endless white around you and light coming at you from all directions, the line between science and story gets very, very blurry. And while the Arctic sun was the worst offender, it wasn't alone. The glare off frozen sea ice, glacial cliffs, and wet snow during melt season could be just as brutal. In some regions, people learned to recognize days. Those bright, windless days when it was particularly risky to go out without protection. The seasoned elders would warn you. They'd say things like, "Today, even the shadows are sharp." So it wasn't just about goggles. It was about timing, awareness, community wisdom, and that's something modern life tends to forget. Back then, your vision wasn't yours alone, it was a shared asset. If one hunter lost their sight, the group's survival got harder. So you protected yourself not just for your sake, but for the sake of everyone who relied on your eyes. That shared responsibility gave rise to some pretty clever preventive strategies. Kids were taught early to squint instinctively in the sun. Families made tiny training goggles from bark for toddlers, not toys, not costumes, but practical tools to instill habits young. There's even evidence some groups sang little songs to children while tying their goggles, repeating phrases about seeing strong and facing the white fire. Parenting tip: lullabies and eye safety go surprisingly well together. Historians still debate how widespread snow goggles were across the Arctic. Some regions used them more religiously, while others had less need, thanks to frequent cloud cover or different environmental angles. But one thing's clear: the communities that needed them really needed them, and they made sure everyone knew it. You pause again at the edge of a frozen inlet. A narrow crack cuts through the ice like a black ribbon, and you realize how easy it would be to miss without your goggles. You remember hearing that even modern rescue pilots wear specially tinted lenses when flying over snowfields. Otherwise, they might overlook deep crevasses or obstacles that blend into the white. Isn't that something? A technology born in an igloo is still saving lives from the cockpit of a search and rescue chopper. You kneel down beside the crack, watching the icy water bubble beneath. It's mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, until you remember those spirals and the warnings. You blink and look away. Better not test your luck. As you stand, your reflection catches briefly in a jagged chunk of ice. It's a warped image, face half obscured by fur and those gleaming, narrow ice slits. You look like a time traveler, a living link in a chain that stretches back thousands of years. And for just a moment, it's not the sun you fear. It's forgetting how much we owe to the people who figured this out long before anyone else even thought to try. You run your fingers gently along the smooth, cold surface of the snow goggles you now wear, marveling at the craftsmanship. They're not just survival gear, they're art. Each pair carved meticulously from caribou antler or driftwood, sometimes even walrus ivory, shaped to fit the contours of the face as if tailor-made. The edges are polished so finely they catch the faintest glimmer of light, while the slits are razor-thin, barely wide enough for your eyes to peek through. It's the kind of detail that could only come from generations of painstaking practice. This isn't a hurried DIY project, it's an artisan's work. These goggles are the Rolex watches of the Arctic, combining functionality and style in perfect harmony. And like any luxury brand, there's variation from the austere and minimal to those adorned with delicate carvings and etched patterns. Maybe these decorations told a story, marked status, or simply satisfied the human itch to make survival beautiful. You might find it amusing that such humble items were the ancestors of the sunglasses we slap on to look cool at the beach or block out a hangover's glare. Yet, these bone goggles did more than just shade eyes, they saved lives. The materials themselves say a lot. Caribou antler is lightweight yet incredibly durable, perfect for a harsh climate where every ounce counts. Driftwood was a clever alternative for those without access to bone, and in some areas, even ivory and baleen were used. Each material offered subtle differences in weight, flexibility, and warmth. Historians still argue whether the choice of material affected the effectiveness of the goggles or if it was more about what was locally available. Either way, the ingenuity lies in using what nature provides, proving once again that necessity breeds innovation. You notice the subtle curvature along the sides, designed to wrap slightly around the face to block peripheral glare, a feature that must have come after countless seasons of trial and error. It's like a natural visor, and the more you study it, the more you realize just how thoughtful this design was. A quirky tidbit: some goggles had tiny holes drilled above or below the slits. Were these decorative? Ventilation? Or perhaps to allow slight peripheral vision without compromising glare reduction? The jury's still out. Scholars still debate the purpose, but it's fun to imagine ancient Arctic fashion statements. Honey, your goggles have extra holes today. You smile at the thought. In terms of function, the slits weren't just narrow to reduce light, but also cleverly positioned to sharpen vision. The pinhole effect created by these slits increases depth of field, letting you see details more clearly. Think of it like squinting on purpose. The narrower the slit, the crisper the image. This was crucial for spotting seals poking through ice holes or tracking distant prey. Meanwhile, the goggles also limited exposure to blowing snow and wind, preventing painful eye dryness. So, they were multitaskers, protection from glare, snow, and wind, three major enemies in the Arctic environment. You might laugh, but these ancient goggles even anticipated some modern design principles. For instance, the snug fit around the face reduced fogging, something many of us struggle with today in our fancy ski goggles or cycling glasses. Imagine wearing bulky, foggy goggles while trying to stalk a seal through ice cracks. Not exactly a recipe for success. But the Inuit knew this well. The goggles hugged the face closely without suffocating, balanced perfectly with fur hoods and face masks. Historians still argue whether the ornamental carvings held spiritual significance or were simply decorative. Some theories suggest they represented clan markings or were meant to invoke protection from the spirits. After all, in many indigenous cultures, tools and clothing blur the line between the practical and the sacred. You stare at a pair with subtle wave patterns carved along the edges. They look like frozen ocean currents, a silent homage to the sea that sustains life here. It's humbling to realize that in this vast, stark landscape, people found ways to combine survival, art, and identity in something as seemingly simple as snow goggles. Your fingers trace the carved details one last time before slipping the goggles back on. The familiar narrowing of your vision sharpens again. You feel a little cooler, a little safer. Like you're wearing not just a tool, but a legacy. As you step away from the cold, stark Arctic landscapes in your mind, your thoughts drift southward, far from the frozen tundra into the blazing deserts of ancient Egypt. Here, the sun is a ruthless monarch, commanding respect and fear. And yet, despite the intense glare, the ancient Egyptians developed their own clever ways to shield their eyes, just not quite with carved bone and narrow slits. You picture yourself walking along the Nile's edge, golden sands stretching beyond the palm-lined banks. The air is thick with heat and dust, the sun beating down mercilessly. You see the regal figures of pharaohs and priests, their faces adorned with thick black eye paint extending in elegant wings toward the temples. This is coal, a mix of galena, lead sulfide, and other minerals, applied not just for beauty but for protection. Surprisingly, coal isn't just cosmetic. It's an ancient form of sunscreen and eye protection, designed to reduce the harsh glare and possibly shield against infections. The dark pigment absorbs sunlight, cutting down the amount of reflected light entering the eyes. Some modern studies suggest it might even have antimicrobial properties. Imagine a time before sunglasses when eye health was a life or death matter, especially for those who spent long hours under unrelenting sunlight. The Egyptian solution was elegant in its simplicity. Paint your eyelids dark, like a natural pair of sunglasses. There's no carved antler, but it did the job. Historians still argue whether the eye paint's protective qualities were the primary reason for its use, or if religious symbolism and aesthetics took precedence. Either way, the lines painted around the eyes became iconic, making the cat eye look popular millennia before it hit Hollywood red carpets. Here's a fun side note. Some texts suggest the pigment helped reduce the glare of the desert sands and also repelled flies and other pests that might irritate the eyes. So it was practical and stylish, kind of like wearing sunglasses with bug spray built in. You wander through an ancient market, hearing the chatter of traders bartering for spices and linen. Craftsmen are busy making intricate jewelry, while scribes write on papyrus scrolls, their eyes squinting under the bright sun. Their hands probably carried little carved goggles made of bone, right? Well, actually, no. This technology seems to have stayed mostly northern for centuries, even as Egypt and Mesopotamia flourished under their own suns. Yet, the concept of eye protection through modification was very much alive. Some priests wore special veils or hats designed to shade their eyes during ceremonies, and travelers often draped scarves over their heads, casting shadows across their faces. Imagine explaining Inuit snow goggles to an Egyptian artisan. They might have found the idea intriguing but alien. After all, their sun was dry, the glare coming from sand and water, not ice and snow. Still, this is a reminder that different environments breed different solutions. While the Inuit carved sunglasses from bone, Egyptians painted on their own shade. Both adapted ingeniously to the challenges their worlds posed. And so, your journey extends beyond the Arctic. It stretches across deserts and glaciers, linking human ingenuity through climate and culture. Wherever the sun threatened your vision, people found a way to fight back, sometimes with carved bone, sometimes with mineral paint. It's a fascinating dance of survival and creativity, reminding you that our ancestors were always looking for ways to see better and live longer. And that some solutions, no matter how far-flung or quirky, end up converging on the same goal: protecting the fragile window to our souls, our eyes. You step back into the snow, but this time your journey follows the whispers of trade routes and migration paths, traveling beyond the Inuit homeland. The snow goggles, those clever slits of bone and wood, didn't remain confined to the Arctic. Their influence crept farther than you might expect, carried by wandering peoples, trade, and sometimes sheer necessity. You imagine the routes stretching across frozen Siberian landscapes, winding through mountain passes and endless forests. Small nomadic groups passed ideas along like precious cargo, snow goggles among them. In these harsh environments, the need to protect one's vision was universal. Historians still argue whether these designs reached Siberia independently or if they were directly inspired by Inuit craftsmanship. Some archaeological finds suggest that similar goggles, made from bone or wood with narrow slits, appeared in Siberian cultures around the same time. The similarities are striking, but the question remains: was this convergent evolution or cultural diffusion? You stand on the edge of a frozen river in your mind, picturing hunters squinting through slits, scanning the white horizon for prey. The goggles didn't just block the sun. They were a survival language, spoken silently across generations and geography. It's surprising how these humble artifacts connect disparate cultures. In some Siberian groups, goggles were even fashioned with attached fur linings to keep snow and cold out. The idea of layering, combining materials for function, feels like an Arctic design principle. Meanwhile, back west, some early European explorers in the 16th and 17th centuries encountered Arctic natives, wearing snow goggles, and documented them with awe and confusion. For a long time, the wider world considered the goggles exotic oddities rather than practical inventions. And yet, the essence of the design, narrow eye slits to block glare, eventually permeated into other traditions. Though snow goggles never became mainstream outside polar regions, their principle inspired various forms of protective eyewear. A quirky tidbit here: there's a fascinating but little-known case of goggles with vertical slits being found in some Siberian burials. The purpose of those vertical slits remains a mystery, and historians still argue whether they were meant for specialized vision, spiritual reasons, or even a unique kind of protection. These variations remind you that even the best inventions morph as they travel, shaped by local needs and beliefs. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but a conversation across cultures. As you picture the frozen trade routes, you realize these goggles symbolize more than eye protection. They are tokens of human ingenuity, adaptation, and connection across seemingly isolated worlds. It's a reminder that even in the coldest, most remote places, ideas travel faster than you might think, carried on the breath of traders, hunters, and dreamers. You tuck that thought away and prepare for your next step in this story: a glance towards sunnier, dustier places where different solutions to eye protection were taking shape. You find yourself transported to the sun-baked shores of the Mediterranean, where history's great empires rose and fell beneath a dazzling sky. Here, squinting wasn't just a reflex, it was a way of life. Gladiators, senators, and emperors alike sought ways to shield their eyes from the relentless glare. You picture a Roman gladiator stepping into the arena, visorless and barefaced, squinting fiercely against the midday sun. There were no bone goggles or slits carved from antler here. Instead, the Romans improvised, relying on smoky quartz and tinted glass, though rudimentary by today's standards. Historians still argue exactly how prevalent these early forms of protective eyewear were. Some say they were luxuries reserved for the elite, while others believe they were practical tools used by soldiers and charioteers to improve vision and reduce glare during battle. There's an intriguing legend that Emperor Nero wore polished emeralds to watch gladiatorial contests, though historians debate whether this was for spectacle, vision correction, or to protect his eyes from the sun's glare. The idea of a green-tinted lens is surprisingly modern, like the ancestor of today's polarized glasses. On the fringes of the empire, common folk improvised with smoky quartz crystals. These naturally dark stones could be shaped and worn as primitive sunglasses, reducing the sun's harshness. They weren't perfect, but in a world without sunglasses, even a little shade was a blessing. Interestingly, the Romans also used eye cosmetics much like the Egyptians, though more for fashion and ritual than sun protection. Coal and similar substances made appearances, especially among women. You imagine the scene: a gladiator wiping sweat from his brow, squinting under the brutal sun, trying to spot an opponent's opening. Maybe he wished for Inuit-style goggles, narrow and practical, rather than risking sun blindness in the arena. A quirky tidbit: the Roman poet Juvenal once joked about men who squinted, as if hiding secrets behind their eyes. While that was probably metaphorical, it's a reminder that squinting had social meanings too, not just practical ones. As you wander through Roman marketplaces and colonnades, you notice the beginning of a cultural shift. Eye protection was moving from pure survival to a blend of status, style, and practicality. This trend would only grow in the centuries to come. You realize that while the Mediterranean never embraced the carved snow goggles, the core idea of shielding the eyes endured. The quest to conquer light, glare, and glare-induced blindness was universal, even if the methods varied wildly. You blink into the bright sunshine once more, feeling a deep appreciation for the variety of human ingenuity. Whether carved from antler or fashioned from glass, every solution tells a story of struggle, adaptation, and style. Now, you glide across centuries and lands, arriving in the shimmering canals of 18th-century Venice. A city floating on water, bathed in light and buzzing with fashion, intrigue, and invention. Here, sunglasses begin their slow transformation from pure practicality to fashion statement, worn by aristocrats who delight in their mystique and mysticism. Imagine walking down the narrow, bustling streets, your footsteps muffled by gondolas gliding under stone bridges. Venetian nobles stroll by, faces framed by elaborate lace and powdered wigs, their eyes hidden behind tinted glass lenses held in delicate frames. The lenses are often colored emerald green, smoky brown, even blue, not just for sun protection but for style and sometimes secrecy. These early sunglasses, though crude compared to today's standards, serve dual purposes. They shield from the glare bouncing off the water and marble buildings, and they signal status. Wearing tinted glasses becomes a subtle way of hiding your gaze, whether from curious onlookers or secret lovers. Historians still argue about the exact origins of the Venetian tinted glass tradition. Some claim glassmakers in Murano developed colored lenses as a byproduct of their glass artistry, while others suggest they adapted imported technologies from the East. The quirky truth is that these sunglasses also offered a hint of mystery. To hide one's eyes was to wield power. Venetian courtesans reportedly used sunglasses to flirt without giving away too much. Masks and glasses together created layers of secrecy and allure, blending function with fashion. You picture an 18th-century Venetian ball, with couples swirling beneath chandeliers. A noblewoman raises her glass, her eyes behind dark lenses sparkling with intrigue. Sunglasses are not just protection here, they are a weapon of social dance. In this era, the concept of eyewear begins to shift. It's no longer solely about survival or basic utility, but enters the realm of identity and personal expression. The spectacle, pun intended, becomes part of the game. And yet, for all their glamour, these Venetian glasses still echo their Arctic ancestors in one key way. They're about controlling how much light and information reaches your eyes. They give you power over your vision and over what you reveal to others. It's a delicate balance of exposure and concealment that would carry forward into the modern world. You step onto a gondola for a moment, feeling the gentle sway of water beneath you, and marvel at how something as simple as tinted glass has traveled from icy survival gear to high society's must-have accessory. The journey of sunglasses is far from over. The gondola glides silently away, and your mind drifts to the American Wild West. Vast deserts, sun-bleached plains, and endless skies. Here, sunglasses take on a rugged new identity, worn by cowboys, prospectors, and frontier settlers who stare down blazing suns and swirling dust storms. You picture a weather-beaten cowboy squinting into the horizon, the sun merciless and unforgiving. His options are limited, but necessity pushes innovation. Early versions of sunglasses in this era often involved darkened glass or smoked lenses, sometimes cobbled together from whatever materials were at hand. The iconic aviator style hasn't yet appeared, but rudimentary sunshades are gaining popularity among those who spend long days outside. These are not just fashion statements but critical gear for survival in harsh climates. Historians still argue when exactly sunglasses became common in the American West, but diaries and photographs suggest that by the late 19th century, tinted spectacles were increasingly used to combat glare, dust, and debris. A quirky tidbit: some prospectors in the Gold Rush era reportedly crafted makeshift goggles from discarded glass bottles, ground down to fit in frames or even wrapped in leather. They weren't pretty, but they worked. The dusty trails and rugged landscapes called for practicality. Sunglasses needed to stay put during rough rides and offer protection against not just sunlight but flying grit kicked up by horses and wagons. You imagine a stagecoach barreling through a dusty canyon, the driver's eyes shielded by dark lenses, face grim with concentration. These sunglasses were a frontier tool like hats, boots, and guns. Yet, even here, sunglasses were more than utility. They signaled a certain persona: the stoic, unflinching individual who could stare down the elements and keep going. They were part of the mythos of the West. From the Arctic to Venice to the American frontier, sunglasses have evolved and adapted, reflecting the environments and cultures that shaped them. You wipe a bit of dust from your goggles and smile at the realization: sunglasses aren't just a modern convenience. They're a storybook of human resilience, innovation, and style, written in bone, glass, and leather. The gondola glides silently away, and your mind drifts to the American Wild West. Vast deserts, sun-bleached plains, and endless skies. Here, sunglasses take on a rugged new identity, worn by cowboys, prospectors, and frontier settlers who stare down blazing suns and swirling dust storms. You picture a weather-beaten cowboy squinting into the horizon, the sun merciless and unforgiving. His options are limited, but necessity pushes innovation. Early versions of sunglasses in this era often involved darkened glass or smoked lenses, sometimes cobbled together from whatever materials were at hand. The iconic aviator style hasn't yet appeared, but rudimentary sunshades are gaining popularity among those who spend long days outside. These are not just fashion statements but critical gear for survival in harsh climates. Historians still argue when exactly sunglasses became common in the American West, but diaries and photographs suggest that by the late 19th century, tinted spectacles were increasingly used to combat glare, dust, and debris. A quirky tidbit: some prospectors in the Gold Rush era reportedly crafted makeshift goggles from discarded glass bottles, ground down to fit in frames or even wrapped in leather. They weren't pretty, but they worked. The dusty trails and rugged landscapes called for practicality. Sunglasses needed to stay put during rough rides and offer protection against not just sunlight but flying grit kicked up by horses and wagons. You imagine a stagecoach barreling through a dusty canyon, the driver's eyes shielded by dark lenses, face grim with concentration. These sunglasses were a frontier tool like hats, boots, and guns. Yet, even here, sunglasses were more than utility. They signaled a certain persona: the stoic, unflinching individual who could stare down the elements and keep going. They were part of the mythos of the West. From the Arctic to Venice to the American frontier, sunglasses have evolved and adapted, reflecting the environments and cultures that shaped them. You wipe a bit of dust from your goggles and smile at the realization: sunglasses aren't just a modern convenience. They're a storybook of human resilience, innovation, and style, written in bone, glass, and leather. You pause for a moment and imagine the invention of the modern sunglass lens. It wasn't a singular moment but rather a gradual evolution influenced by science, fashion, and practicality. Enter the 20th century, where technology and mass production would transform sunglasses from niche survival gear into ubiquitous accessories. It's the era of innovation. Optical glass improved, allowing lenses to be ground with precision. Tinted lenses were no longer just dark or smoky, but came in a spectrum of colors designed to enhance contrast or reduce glare. Polarized lenses, which dramatically cut down reflected light, began to appear mid-century, revolutionizing outdoor eyewear. You think about how aviators came into the picture during World War II. Designed for pilots who had to stare into the bright sky for hours, these sunglasses featured large lenses that covered much of the eye area, providing comprehensive protection. The aviator style quickly jumped from airfields to city streets, becoming a fashion icon. Historians still argue how much military needs drove sunglass innovation versus civilian fashion trends. Some believe soldiers' demand for better eye protection accelerated research, while others argue that public appetite for style was the real catalyst. A quirky tidbit: Ray-Ban, the brand synonymous with aviators, initially called their model anti-glare sunglasses when launched in 1937. The term Ray-Ban itself wasn't coined until later. Imagine telling someone in the Arctic that one day these small slits in goggles would inspire a global brand known worldwide. You consider how sunglasses also became symbols of rebellion and coolness. Think Hollywood stars of the 50s and 60s like James Dean and Audrey Hepburn, who popularized sunglasses as fashion statements as much as protection. The lens technology also diversified: photochromic lenses that darken in sunlight, mirrored coatings, and frames made from new lightweight plastics. Sunglasses were now a blend of science and art, comfort and personality. But underneath it all, the primal need remains the same: to guard our eyes from harsh light, dust, and injury. That instinct to shield your vision stretches back to the Inuit carving slits in bone to stare down a blizzard. You realize sunglasses are not just about what's in front of your eyes, but about what you choose to see, and how clearly. Your mind drifts to the cultural symbolism sunglasses have accumulated over time. No longer merely tools for survival or fashion, sunglasses became icons of mystery, power, and persona. Think of the classic noir detective, dark lenses hiding secrets and intentions. Sunglasses shield emotions, create distance, and provide a barrier. They transform the wearer. Behind those dark lenses, you could be anyone. The ambiguity grants anonymity, a superpower in social interaction. In some societies, sunglasses even became tools of social control or political power. Dictators and celebrities alike don them to shield their gaze from the public, to avoid revealing too much, or to project an aura of untouchable coolness. Historians still argue whether sunglasses in politics first appeared as practical tools or calculated symbols. Was it a case of convenience or image crafting? The answer likely lies somewhere in between. A quirky tidbit: in some cultures, wearing sunglasses indoors is considered rude, while in others, it's seen as a sign of status and style. The social rules around sunglasses are surprisingly complex and varied. You ponder the psychology behind sunglasses. Studies show people perceive those wearing sunglasses as more attractive, confident, and mysterious. That psychological power adds another layer to these ancient tools. Yet, this modern symbolic use contrasts sharply with the raw, urgent needs that birthed snow goggles thousands of years ago. It's a journey from life-saving necessity to fashion and cultural statement. But at the heart of it all, the instinct remains: to control how much light and information your eyes receive and what you reveal to the world. Your fingers brush your own lenses and you smile softly, appreciating the long, winding journey that brought this simple accessory from icy Arctic tunnels to neon-lit city streets. The history of sunglasses wouldn't be complete without considering the environmental impacts of our modern obsession with eyewear. With millions of pairs produced annually, sunglasses have become a major industry, and, like many industries, one that wrestles with sustainability challenges. You think about the materials used: plastics derived from petroleum, metal frames requiring mining, and lenses coated with chemicals for polarization and tinting. While innovations have led to biodegradable frames and recycled materials, the vast majority of sunglasses still contribute to environmental waste. It's a sobering contrast to the Inuit snow goggles, made entirely from natural, locally sourced materials, designed to last and be reused for generations. Those ancient goggles embodied sustainability, crafted to serve a critical function in harmony with the environment. Historians still argue whether the modern push for sustainable eyewear can genuinely replace mass-produced, disposable sunglasses. The industry's answer is evolving, but consumer habits also play a role. A quirky tidbit: some companies have started offering sunglasses made from recycled fishing nets or bamboo, combining eco-consciousness with style. There are even artists who create one-of-a-kind goggles and glasses from reclaimed materials, turning sustainability into wearable art. You reflect on how this shift back toward environmentally friendly materials is almost a full circle, a nod to ancient practices where nothing was wasted and every part of an animal or plant had a purpose. This thoughtful craftsmanship carries a quiet wisdom, reminding you that innovation isn't always about new technology. Sometimes, it's about rediscovering and respecting what our ancestors already knew. With that, you adjust your goggles and step forward, carrying both history and hope in your vision. As twilight descends over your mental landscape, you contemplate the future of sunglasses and eye protection in a rapidly changing world. Technology is moving fast, and what was once carved from bone or crafted from simple glass is now intertwined with cutting-edge materials and smart capabilities. You imagine sunglasses embedded with augmented reality displays, projecting information directly onto your retina. The days of squinting into the sun might soon be replaced by digital shields that adjust tint in real time, monitor UV exposure, and even offer night vision or thermal imaging. Historians still argue how quickly these advancements will become commonplace and accessible. Will high-tech eyewear be a luxury for the few or a necessity for all? And how will this shift reshape our relationship with light and vision? A quirky tidbit: prototypes of smart glasses already exist that can translate languages instantly, record video, or adjust lenses automatically based on lighting. It's like stepping into science fiction, yet rooted in humanity's age-old need to see clearly and comfortably. Despite these futuristic leaps, the fundamental challenge remains unchanged: protecting the eyes while allowing you to engage with the world. You feel a profound connection to those ancient artisans who first carved their snow goggles, understanding that no matter the era, the quest to master light and vision is a constant human story. As you pull your modern sunglasses low and gaze toward the horizon, you realize that this journey is not just about history. It's about the evolving human experience itself. As night deepens and the world quiets, you reflect on the remarkable journey sunglasses have taken. From the first Inuit snow goggles, carved with care to battle blinding snow glare, to the sleek, high-tech eyewear of today. Each pair tells a story of human resilience, adaptation, and creativity. They are more than just tools. They are artifacts of culture, symbols of identity, and companions in adventure. You remember the narrow slits cutting through bone, the shimmering painted eyes of Egyptian priests, the smoky lenses of Venetian nobles, and the rugged glass of frontier cowboys, all linked by a shared human need to see the world clearly, to protect the delicate windows of our souls. Historians still argue over the finer details of this story, but one truth shines bright: our ancestors' innovations, born of necessity and environment, continue to shape how we engage with light and vision. You smile softly as the final images fade, the warmth of your own room replacing the cold Arctic wind and the blazing desert sun. The goggles rest lightly on your nose, a timeless bridge across millennia. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Sleep well, dream deeply, and may your eyes always be protected.